Thanks very much, Jennifer. Well, this is a real delight for me. Thanks, everyone, for coming. It's been a great 4 years, and as Jennifer said, this is the end of phase presentation, culminating 4 years of work with Gaia University, and the focus will be on my capstone phase and exploring the OPs there. So the capstone journey and my specialization within the degree of integrative eco-social design is in applied permaculture design. So we'll be talking a little bit about that specialization today as well. And my master's thesis is on relocalization. I'm going to say a few words about what that thesis has meant and how it's informed my project. We'll explore the 5 different output packets from this year and some of the outcomes and best practices. When I did my learning review for my pre-capstone year, I talked quite a bit about tools that Gaia had brought into my world, into my utility belt. And I go back and re-look at those and talk about how that's transformed through this capstone phase. And then, with the degree and the specialization both in design, I feel like my growth as a designer has been huge over these last 4 years. And one of the things I want to share today is patterns of design methodologies that I notice and am aware of, including patterns of action learning, and that's what I call curriculum creation, and we'll be talking about that within several different of my OPs. So the specialization of applied permaculture design. So one of the things I want to look at is how we approach design and the lens that this applied permaculture design comes through. I try and remain rooted in permaculture principles and permaculture ethics. So, these are some of my favorites that I've looked at kind of through the course of all of my projects. And then the why, I want to look at the how, the why, and the what of permaculture design and how I'm applying that to all of my different project work. And the why of creating resilient and regenerative systems that honor Mother Gaia, i.e. earth care, human life, people care, and indeed life in all forms by acknowledging the interconnectedness of all life, the fair share element. So these permaculture ethics form in some ways the basis for me of like what am I creating these projects around, and the how I'm using the principles. And then when we ask what we're doing, my projects have been very diverse, and I've been doing a lot of teaching as part of the permaculture design. I've been creating new businesses, learning new skills, like a lot of action learning both for myself and that I bring kind of the hands-on workshops to some places where I teach that. And so this collage represents quite a diversity of projects, and this applied element of permaculture design, like whether we talk about applied linguistics, applied physics, applied mathematics, like what we're talking about is taking this discipline from academia and applying it to real life problems, to industry, creating practical applications, practical use of the permaculture design. So, the projects represent the philosophy, the theoretical, abstract conceptualization of permaculture design, and are grounding it, rooting it in these projects. So there, when I research applied permaculture design online, there's quite a bit of schools that are, after people finish their PDC, they take them through more projects, much in a similar fashion to Gaia, and talk about applying it. And then there's many businesses that are applying permaculture design, and those can range from in terms of scale, they can range from backyard gardens to multi-village projects. And of course, there's huge permaculture design, applications of permaculture design going on in, particularly in the developing world, where there's opportunity for scaling projects up and having the resources to do this. Of course, in terms of land stewardship, this can happen in urban or rural settings. A number of people think about most applied permaculture design being on homesteads in rural areas, although, urban permaculture, we know that there's many projects that can happen, that look at community building, at education, at tools and technology. And And of course, with permaculture design, the relationship, the acknowledging how everything is connected and the diverse elements within any system is very important. But, one of my projects was very singular in focus in that, it was a PV, a photovoltaic installation. And that, similarly, we can apply many of the same ethics and principles to that project as we can with a system that contains many elements. So, give you a brief summary of my 5 OPs. I started out with my learning intentions and pathway design, following that path, and I moved into health and happiness in our own personal ecosystem. This was a zone zero approach, and I've spent, a fair bit of the 20 years of my adult professional life doing quite a bit in the work of health and well-being, both as a Whole Foods caterer and as a hands-on healer, in addition to other things. So I have quite a bit of experience and insight into the healing of people care, so to speak. Chocolates and cordials and curricula. This was designing learning systems, action learning systems for myself that also are informing new small businesses, like addressing that economic aspect of permaculture and small sustainable businesses, and training myself as a chocolatier and a cordial maker, playing a lot with fresh herbs. OP4 land stewardship. I have 1 acre homestead down in Baja, and I am using this, to create my own living fence, food forest. I started teaching classes this year down on the site, so a lot of great opportunities to incorporate permaculture, both techniques for my ecosystem and then also bring education down there. So that's been very fun. And this final OP that today's talk gets a lot of its information out of is designing to design, the learning review of this capstone phase. Another overview page. So again, the degree that many of us are earning in integrative eco-social design, and my specialization is in applied permaculture design. So I wanted to, again, look at some of those OPs through this permaculture flower. And for me, my different OPs, many of them touch on education and culture and health and spiritual well-being and land and nature stewardship. But then, they all, they touch briefly on, building. I do some cob building in one of them, and tools and technology with the PV installation. So every petal has been incorporated in my OPs. And this eco-social aspect of the design that we are working towards, I love to think about it as the ecology, looking at how we are approaching earth care through that ecology, and then that social element of people care, both of myself and of the community that I'm part of. And then the economy, to me, is that third ethic of fair share, and kind of how are we returning the surplus? How are we, and this speaks very much to that relocalization thesis that I like, in terms of how are we creating systems that are scaled appropriately so that we are impacting the ecology, the economy, and our society in good ways. So my thesis on relocalization, and I'm gonna go through these OPs again and look at it through the lens of the permaculture flower. So with the health and happiness, one of the things I wanted to show is how everything is connected. And sort of the highlight flower for this one certainly is health and spiritual well-being. My work as a massage therapist and Reiki healer and an herbalist, and looking at natural medicine, body, mind, spirit disciplines. This also touches on the petal of community governance with conflict resolution, nonviolent communication, and looking at action learning through childhood education and my own learning. Then as we go into the cordials and chocolates and curricula, this one for me, the two biggest petals that this touches in on are finance and economics, looking at how do I obtain a yield, what's my relationship to being an entrepreneur, to being a sustainable business developer, conscious of the triple bottom line. And the culture and education piece was really important for me here too. This OP represented for me a real growth and an embodying of understanding how I'm an action learner. And I started developing these curricula that I'll talk about more, and I did a bunch more of those in my OP4 on a smaller level. But the curriculum that I created in order to be a chocolatier was very fun and really speaks to that culture and education piece of how education is transforming in the 21st century. Then the land stewardship OP on my acre down in Baja. Of course, the land and nature stewardship petal is the most touched upon with, creating a food forest, organic agriculture, looking at soil creation, plant propagation. I started a nursery down there. But then this plays into health and spiritual well-being, of course, with being in the garden is, I think, one of the best herbal medicines is being in the garden. And as I said, this, we touched in on cob building. I've built several cob benches down there, and a lot of fun projects around land stewardship. Those are the 3 project OPs from my capstone phase. And, to tie this all together, I wanted to bring in a couple of my OPs from my pre-capstone phase, because this is the one where I really touch in on the pedal of tools and technology through the solar PV design and installation, catching and storing energy. And the last one of Land of Milk and Honey is a course that I teach on farmstead arts each year at Esalen Institute out here in California. And that looks a lot at culture and education, like do-it-yourself, hands-on projects with people that also are really about health and spiritual well-being. We do quite a bit of food production, including fermentation, which, of course, Bill Mollison has written a book on. And looking at these farmstead arts, we were making our own medicines like tinctures and salves in the class, and we start a beehive and teach people about, farmstead scale food production, breads, and microbiology. So we'll go to my learning intentions and pathway design for my capstone year. I always like Dwight Eisenhower's quote of, "I've always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable." And that's how I'm feeling a lot about that goal articulation phase of any design methodology. Key outcomes during this one. One of the things I encourage all associates to do, I started doing this structured journaling. This came to me during my lipid where I create a framework, and a lot of this was guided by feedback I was receiving from Jennifer, where I would look at the metrics or the feedback Jennifer was giving me, and I would give myself moments of like, okay, I want to write on what is my relationship to being a leader, or how am I collaborating with people. And during any of my projects, I would do that. And then when it came time to finish my OP, I had all these great notes that were like intentionally structured journaled about the metrics that I know Gaia cares about the criteria that each OP ideally contains. In terms of documentation, one of the things I've found for myself is that I don't need to document pages and pages after experiences. Like I aim to be more succinct and do 1 to 2 simple reflections, the headlines. I find that as the project goes on, having the headlines clearly and succinctly articulated is great practice for me. In terms of frameworks, I also, I create a mind map and a metric chart for each of my projects, create a bookmark folder in my browser, and then I have, all the links that I'm going to in that folder. Again, that writing 1 simple sentence, or 1 paragraph after each learning experience. And following my bliss is a good practice for me. Leads me nicely into health and happiness, look at the ways in which everything is connected, and looking at how I nurture and foster my own health and happiness. This OP inspired me to explore many different systems of like how do the Buddhists look at the eightfold path, like what's the right actions, right livelihood to create health and happiness, or similar from a lot of different religious and cultural traditions. And I came up with my own 8 patterns of health that start with the ways in which everything is connected and relationship, the ways in which we're in community, and our relationship to nature. Certainly to me that's a huge part of patterns of health. These next 2 are potentially the ones that Americans, or at least allopaths, would most acknowledge: the exercise and nutrition. Maybe the only two things that a lot of allopaths think inform health. That I think we can see and know as our community that health is much more robust, and that we need to also have awareness of the pause, like after a yoga set, getting into the shavasana, like taking those moments out of life in order to pause, and bringing awareness, competence and attention to what we are doing, bringing that sense of awareness to whether it's our exercise, to our nutrition, to our times in nature. Huge, important element. Purpose is another aspect that, for me, people finding purpose in their life, and for me that's about following their bliss. Like, it's like, what way do we bring that purpose and feel good in our vocation that it brings us our best self out. Attitude of gratitude is certainly one of the key things, I think, that informs our health and happiness. Not to say that there aren't challenges that we need to work through, and that it's great to work through, but maintaining that sense of an attitude that that we are in process and there is growth and expansion possible, I think is wonderful. Many different key outcomes. As I said, I spent 20 plus years of my adult life as a healer in both of the earth with garden designs, of people with hands-on healing, and as a feeding people, working as a caterer. So to me, healing, this was an opportunity to pull together some of the information that's been steeping in my body for 20 plus years. So a lot of articles came out of this thing, a number regarding herbalism, like Herbal Allies and my natural first aid kit, herbal medicine making how-to. We do salves and tinctures during some of the classes that I teach, and an herbal glossary, adaptogen chart, natural cleaning products. That's a big one that for me also involves economy and kind of how we think of green cleaners. For me, the big ones are vinegar, hydrogen peroxide, and baking soda from Dr. Bronner's. And to me, it's like we can even greenify our natural cleaning one more level. Nutrition, for me, it's the big thing is whole food. Like, it's just like that's the big word in my world. And cleansing, I've done workshops on both Ayurvedic and living food cleansings, and some of the awarenesses and stuff came out of those. Exotic spice chart, another lens into how we look at nutrition. Exercise, my 10-minute morning routine that plays around a lot with the spine, looking at making sure we're getting twists, forward bends, back bends, or heart openers, making sure we're keeping our spine alive. Stress, babies, growth mindset, how to receive a massage. That was a very fun one that I now send to all my clients when I do house calls, and it's like, dropping people into that space of like, okay, I'm ready to receive. I'm ready to receive this nourishment. And I think that was one of the greatest gifts of doing the massage training for me. Some of the movies, at each of my caterings, people invariably ask for my kale salad and my pate making. So I did some videos so that I could more easily tell people how to do it. Baby massage, some of my pranayams. Personally and in life, this OP definitely inspired a lot of unstructured outdoor playtime, including going sledding for the first time in 20 years. Growing Edge's next step. So, within this whole world, there's obviously more articles I'd like to be writing. I'm very passionate about personal health, and home water filter is something I'd like to understand, research, and articulate a little better. Ayurveda is something I've done, a lot of exploration and research in, and I want to create, a chakra chart comparing some of the energies there. I do a lot of chakra healings and the archetypes, overlaying Ayurvedic doshas with Enneagram, looking at archetypes of people is something I really feel like is burgeoning right now in my life. And then you'll see this theme throughout the entire presentation today. Getting a lot of this material that I've created up on my website is one of my big next steps as I complete this capstone phase of my journey. Some of the best practices, again, let me reiterate: go outside and play with your friends, and when you're out there, pause and smell the roses, reflect on what you're grateful for, commune with non-human living organisms. My OP3, again, this was creating a few product lines for myself and the curricula. We'll move into the curricula after this, actually, so I'll just kind of more talk about chocolates and cordials. Obtaining a yield, that sense of being the entrepreneur and creating sustainable, good businesses. Key outcomes, the curriculum for my chocolate school, article on how magical chocolate is, including the history, the botany, the nutrition, and the production. Article on how to temper chocolate. Skill of tempering chocolate, understanding the emulsion of ganache. Chocolate is there's a lot of fat in chocolate, and there's no liquid. And so when we do mix wine or cream or water with chocolate, it will form a ganache, and there's good practices for how to do that. Understanding of cordials. So cordials for me, as compared to like tinctures, I do a lot of tincture making with herbs for my personal medicine. And cordials was a way to use my skills as a chef to infuse some of those flavors. Instead of doing like a major medicinal infusion, I would do like a slightly flavored one, and I'd use some nice sweeteners and make them beautiful. And so I ended up with 13 wonderfully flavored chocolates and 8 cordials. Some of my favorite chocolates were the chocolate-covered cherries, the peanut butter nib cup, the dark or white covered espresso beans, Grand Marnier ganache, and candied orange in dark or white chocolate. The triple ginger tantric ganache in dark chocolate has actually been at 2 of the weddings that I've done this past year. And maca tahini cups, that's me starting to move into some of the medicinal chocolates. I do an electuary out of maca and tahini, and then I put that instead of like a Reese's peanut butter cup. It was a nice adaptogenic cup there. And ghee maple caramel, maple syrup with ghee, lovely caramel out of that just shines in the white chocolate. Bitter caramel and sea salt and dark chocolate. Rosemary infused honey pyramids and bee bread hearts. Bee bread is a lovely bee pollen honey mixture. We make those inside of hearts. And 8 cordials for that product line. The Love Potion and Circulatory Tonic both have a lot of good herbs for the heart, for the cardiac system. And the Nervine is an anxiolytic, and Jug of Punch, playing with some cacao and infusing that into alcohol as well, the cacao honey one, and the adaptogenic whiskey. OP outcomes. This is, the first one was good videos and photos to use for marketing. My use of metrics and charts, like, this framework that I've been constructing at the dawn of each OP, I thought that growing and growing, and this awareness around what criteria am I using to evaluate my OPs, and what is Gaia using. And so this number 3, added awareness to creating concise outcomes relating to the field. And one of the awarenesses I want to share with like all the Gaia associates on the call today is that they're using feedback from your advisor or from buddy calls, and looking at some of the metrics within PDAPO and like designing some of your OP outcomes around that, I think is a good practice. Like the core report outcomes are going to be like what the project you were running. But in terms of the OP outcomes, incorporating some of the tools that Gaia is encouraging, I think is a wonderful way to look at kind of those goals that are OP specific versus specific for the core report. So growing edges, next steps, getting some of these articles, videos, and writings up on my website. As I said, this is a theme through all of my projects. I want to continue experiments with raw chocolate. I actually planted a chocolate tree as part of the next OP, the land stewardship one down in Baja. And, hopefully eventually I'll become a chocolate maker, taking the bean to the cacao mass instead of the cacao mass to the finished product, which was a wonderful thing about being a chocolatier. They don't start with the bean necessarily. They can buy the mass and turn it into, little truffles and stuff instead of working with the raw chocolate. And I'd also like to do more raw medicinals. Eventually, I'd love to go to Costa Rica, and I'm writing up a workshop proposal for Esalen for a chocolate class as well. So some fun next steps, and then a little content thing that came out of this. I thought I'd give you guys a little quick, brief snapshot on how to temper. Tempering chocolate is the snap and the shine. So if you melt chocolate and just let it re-solidify, it'll just be kind of a gooey, fudgy mass. Whereas if you are super aware of the temperature and where the cacao butter is crystallizing, then you end up with the snap and the shine. The snap and the shine of a chocolate bar is the one of the fundamental skills of a chocolatier. It's how to temper chocolate. So the way we do that is we melt the chocolate, 120 degrees, using a double boiler over, some boiling water. And then as we're letting it cool, we seed that with a quarter of the total volume. And we bring that down. So if it was 4 cups of chocolate total, we'd use 3 cups melted and then 1 cup seeding into it. And we'd allow that to cool down to 85 degrees, and then we'd heat that slowly in 10-second increments back up to 88 to 90 degrees, and then pour it off while it's in that range. Of course, there's tempering machines that do this, that are mechanized to do this. I did all my tempering by hand, and I think it's a wonderful, delightful art of working with this beautiful textured element of chocolate and making the cacao butter poured off right at that right magic moment. So best insights practices, 94 is a magic number. You want to make sure most of your seeds melted, and you don't want to bring it back up over 94 or you'll break the temper. Different chocolate is different. So you don't even have to follow all these steps if you're using pre-tempered chocolate. And so you can use you can actually skip step 3 and just cool the 88 to 90 if you're using already tempered couverture pellets, which is a great way to start practicing with it. And so there's a little bit of temperature distinction with tempered and non-tempered. And then couverture versus chocolate chips. I think this is a fun awareness to have about chocolate, is that the amount of chocolate solids, like the brown part, and the amount of cacao butter, like the white fatty part, can be very different. Like, for instance, in chocolate chips, it's only 20% cacao butter and then sugar and like a fair bit of the solids. So they're much more bitter. Well, they might be mitigated with sugar, but you could have an 80 or 90% bar of chocolate, one of which is 20% cacao solids and 70% butter, and the other one is 70% solids and 20% butter, and they would taste radically different. So the bitterness is infused by how the chocolate maker, how much butter to cacao butter to cacao solids they put in. And couverture is what we use in the industry to do fine truffles and stuff like that, because it has a nice 50 to 60% amount of cacao butter, so it has this nice sheen, real easy to work with. So different chocolate is different. Even different manufacturers are different. Dark milk and white chocolate are obviously very different. And I think white chocolate actually has a bad rap. And I love white chocolate, partly because it embodies, for me, it doesn't have any of those darks, but it doesn't have any fat in it that is not cacao butter, whereas milk chocolate can have other fats in it. So I love the fact that white chocolate is like eating cacao butter that's sweetened. So it's a fun product for me to work with. Having Rice Krispies on hand, that was a way to save that last quarter cup to half cup when I was tempering chocolate, because I would make little tempered Rice Krispie treats, and that was very fun. Other best practices, send chocolate to people I like. That social aspect of this project for me was very fun. Documentation. With this has informed part of my catering business too, of making sure I always have a hard copy of the recipe or the action sheet when I'm working on it, so that I can take notes in hard copy. And I want to re-emphasize active experimentation and play kind of throughout. And for me, becoming a chocolatier was largely about playing, doing it 3-4 times a week for 4 or 5 months, and just making the chocolate over and over, failing and seeing what worked. And one of the things that I think is very funny is mousse. There's so many different recipes and styles, but recipes both in terms of ingredient amounts and the process for mousse. And it's such a wonderful chocolate, sugar, cream, and eggs taste good together. So it's you can make up many different methods and processes, and it tastes good. Chocolate tastes good. So that's the big lesson that came out of that OP. Land stewardship, working with nature. So a lot of great outcomes on this, both for the land itself, educationally. I created quite a few slideshows and movies that I think will enhance my my vocation as a landscape garden designer. Also, I want to be offering more workshops down on my homestead, and it's just getting to that critical mass where it's very interesting. I have lots of interesting fruits, lots of interesting medicines. So I created the curriculum for a one-day class. You see the kids there. They came for a 2-hour class. More businesses are in the works kind of down there. On the land, we were doing quite a bit of increased living fence, diversity of fruits through grafting and plant trading, active compost pile, a lot of soil improvement through quite a few different soil mitigation projects. You know, I've been doing some hugelkultur, some sheet mulching, some active compost. So a lot of different things going on down there. I was down there during the hurricane this past year too, and did a little bit of swales and trenches to shift where the water from the hurricane was coming. It's basically a flat parcel, but it was interesting to see how that worked. As I mentioned, quite a few movies came out of this. So, oh my God. Quite a few movies came out of this. So, propagation, I was doing huge amounts of cutting, showed myself grafting avocado trees, and that working over, you know, that was a multi-year long video, planting my cacao trees on my YouTube channel. A lot of my soil improvement strategies are there. And then socially, a lot of gifts, like both offering flower bouquets, offering plants, trees to many friends. So wonderful different aspects kind of as part of this. Growing edges and next steps. Again, getting some of this up onto my website is going to be important. Gaining residency in Mexico is going to be important for the businesses. Like, I started a nursery, but I don't want to sell stuff. I've just been giving it away until I'm legal to start working down there. Garden design. I think technically I can work as a consultant from the States, but I want to gain the residency as my businesses take off down there. And for me, in terms of the propagation, I'm doing, I love all my divisions and cuttings. I want to get better and better with grafting and air layering, and I want to start playing with hybridizing seeds, doing intentional crosses. For propagation, a couple of simple things. I was playing a lot with cuttings. You can see that doing little cuttings, doing the division, doing the grafting, the ground and the air layering both. I implement quite a bit of ground layering on the property and exploring more with the air layering seeds. I worked with a couple of local nurserymen down there, and one of the funny things they both said to me at some course, because I'd always be like, well, how do you propagate this plant with cuttings or layering? And they'd be like, why don't you just grab the seed? So it was very funny to me, that awareness, which I'm a seed saver and a seed starter, but it was just like, I got caught up in some of the other propagation techniques and sometimes would forget to just start seeds. So some patterns around propagation. Most plants like warm, wet. So, creating that womb, that greenhouse, even like inside a plastic bag like a terrarium. Or, down in Baja, I would sometimes just do daily watering because of the way, the terrarium sometimes would get a little bit too humid in there. Warming blankets, which I don't need down in Baja, but that awareness of warm and wet is the environment that we're going for. Aerated and moist, nice moist soil, whether you use coconut moss or peat moss, sphagnum moss, something that's light, that's able to retain moisture. Very nice for the little rootlets. Some awarenesses, like as people start propagating, like the biggest one that I try and give people as they start thinking about how to do cuttings and stuff is being able to look at plants and recognize softwood, semi-wood, and hardwood. Because I think those plants, you can do cuttings for many of them, but I think they're slightly different practices, whereas like softwood, very fragile, and like I sometimes bloom the roots of that in water, whereas hardwood, I don't want to water as much because it can rot with the bark, so it needs much more infrequent watering, whereas the semi-hard is what I most often use because it's the middle of the road and it likes those warm, wet environments and just kind of nice womb environment. Clean shears, morning harvest, other great practices, patterns of propagation. And as we move into the wrap-up, my OP5, Designing to Design, some of the key outcomes here, one of the next pages will look at my Designing to Design chart. So it's like looking at some of the pattern level awareness of different design methodologies that I've been using in this pathway of getting a degree in integrative eco-social design. My master's thesis on relocalization, that was a wonderful outcome for this project this year, this phase of my life. Over the course of the year, tremendous growth, becoming a chocolatier, creating curriculums, line of cordials, initiating a plant nursery, a lot of growth, process growth as a designer in terms of my digital literacy, my online communication awareness around that, ways in which I embrace action learning, particularly my relationship to active experimentation has grown beyond what I could imagine. As I keep emphasizing, creating, expanding that website. I actually, during my learning review of my pre-capstone year, I was learning how to code in HTML, and I was developing a website. And this year's kind of stalled that out because I realized there's so many easy website developers that are more robust than what I can do with the little bit of HTML coding that I can do now. But like I made some pages, but I was like, this is not the area, the maximum point of leverage for me. This is silly to be learning something when there's such good apps that do it better for me. Starting the 3 businesses down in Mexico, the nursery, the garden design, and start doing some chocolates down there, and more workshop proposals. That's a fun way for me to keep the action learning education piece going. So design, we often design from patterns into details. There's a lot of methodologies that I have embraced through my Gaia U pathway. Gasedi is the one that's introduced to many of us through the orientation, and I talk about that a little bit in the next chart too. But Obredimit, NASA engineering. I bring up the NASA one because it's funny. Like instead of saying what's their goal, they say what's the problem. They identify the problem as the first stage. And so when we look over at the pattern, you can either start in the upper left or the upper right. I think it's best practice to start in the upper left with observation or survey. But like Gasedi starts with the goal articulation before the survey. I think observation survey is that competence and attention that Gaia talks about at each stage of the process. So I like to start with observation. I think it's a really nice place to start, and then move into what are my needs, what's the dream, what is the problem, what goals am I articulating. And then I move into the design from there, which to me, like design was a very elusive concept. And now the way I hold design is it's that framework, that structure, the architecture in which I'm able to actively experiment or do. So I think of a syllabus as a type of a design. I think of a timeline as a design tool that really holds that space for us to implement a project within. So that structure, that architecture for me is a big piece of the design the design moment, where we then move into the implementation phase of doing it, of actively experimenting, of rapidly prototyping. So this pattern, and as we do it, some people like Gasedi or Obredimit, like after the implementation, there's the evaluation or the maintenance. And I would contend that that's great if that's letters that are helpful for you. But I would contend that these basic 4, because like then we're basically going back to the original thing of like, okay, well, let's reevaluate. And then it's like, are there any new goals? And so like this basic thing of 4 kind of helps me make it the simplest process that I can. And I think it's fun to put in a lot more letters. So as you'll see, I took Gasedi and Obredimit, and the first design methodology that I created, I was empowered during my pre-capstone year to do Orgbity, which basically looks like a combination of Gasedi and Obredimit. It was me choosing the letters that most resonated with my process. Ironically, the B is not the boundaries of Obredimit. It's brainstorming, which for me is a really important word to acknowledge during the design process. But again, like different people resonate with different words, and I encourage everyone to do their own design methodology, because I think it's a very empowering process as a designer. So I hope you guys are all doing that you guys are all doing that. I did numerous design methodologies. During my time, I would always do a design methodology for the OP itself and create goals for the OP, and then also create goals for the core report. So there was an opportunity to do 2 different design methodologies within each OP, and that let me play and explore, creating kind of fun design methodologies out of systems that I like how does a plant sprout, and like start with the seed and go to the shoot and then the fruit and the root, and like kind of looking at the chakras. How do I design up from the Muladhara up through Svadhisthana, or going all the way up those chakra centers. So that's very fun. We'll look at this last chart. So on the left, hopefully everyone's familiar with Gasedi as it's given to us in the orientation. And the next column is what I entitled Gaia. And I think this is funny because I look at sort of the entire Gaia U phase process as a design methodology where, we start with the survey, with the observation, which is like the LCR, the life and career review, like where am I arriving? And then we go into the goal articulation of the lipid of like, what is my learning intention and pathway to them? And then Gasedi, it has that assessment analyzation phase. And I think talking to your advisor, talking to buddies, talking to your family about like what, okay, here are my goals. Like, can you help me refine, assess like which of these are the most important to me? What it is I want to design, and then creating that architecture, those mind maps, timelines of what it is I'm actually creating in the project, and that creating that architecture frees me to begin actively experimenting, begin implementing within that core report, begin rapid prototyping. So, and then as I finish that implementation phase, then we get into the evaluation, which is like journaling or documentation. It's like what are the outcomes? And maybe we're going into another cycle of like, awareness of observation and new goals, but like, first we can document, journal what did happen. And that can be a complete OP cycle or the cycle of the entire phase with Gaia. Over there on the right, I like to think in Cold Kite. I think Cold Kite really opened my mind to where I'm an abstract conceptualizer and how I can ground more of that into concrete experience and active experimentation. Curriculum creation. This has been a fun thing for me, and I've been creating more and more curriculums because it empowers me as an action learner. And in a lot of ways, I think of curriculum creation as a design methodology for action learning. So if you can think back to those 4 stages that we just had on the previous page, we start with observation of like, oh, I really like chocolate. Like chocolate tastes good. And then like my goal, like, oh, I want to learn to temper chocolate. I want to learn to make better mousses. I want to learn why sometimes my ganaches break and sometimes they don't. So it's it's what is it I want to learn? And I looked into different chocolatiering schools, looked at their syllabi, looked at their kind of like what they were teaching people, and I created my own. And then I the design phase was part of that research of creating the syllabus of like kind of being like, okay, well, here are the skills that I need to have. Here's the classes that I need to teach myself. And then I began implementing it. I was doing it, and I would do it, 4 times a week for months and months, and it's just like it became more and more useful, and it would have functionally the same thing as taking an online, chocolatiering course. Was like I basically was doing that with YouTube and some, I bought some, high-end professional books to like kind of instead of enrolling in the course, and it was like I did the course myself, created my own curriculum. So chocolatier, that was the epitome of my curriculum creation. The cordial making that ran concurrently with that, plant propagator, a lot of research around that as well when I was starting my nursery, and a lot of play. Seed starter, soil steward, a couple of the lighter ones that I was doing while living on the acre down in Baja was I invited a bunch of friends over for a coconut basket weaving class. We had a bunch of palm fronds, always harvesting palm fronds, and we all got together, watched a few videos on how to weave coconut fronds into hats and baskets and walls, and everyone came away with something different from the thing. But we all gained a lot of information and wisdom about how coconut fronds get woven together. And I have some nice baskets that I put my fruit in down there now, and a lot of play with bouquet making as well. So a lot of fun curriculum, a lot of action learning, good other practices for curriculum creation. Creating a glossary and recognizing what tools are needed is a very wonderful practice when you're creating your own curriculums. So as I said, Tools of Gaia is something that my pre-capstone phase really, I wanted to, articulate. I wanted to express the tools that came into my awareness, thankfully, through Gaia. And so some of those things that I wrote about in my pre-capstone OP5 were simply the PDAPO, like looking at what I was presenting through the lens of presentation, organization, design, action learning, process, outcomes. I hope everyone is beginning to get that PDAPO acronym down and understand that I want to look at all these things as I am working on each OP. Like, how am I functioning as an action learner here? How am I functioning as a designer? And in my capstone year, I began to understand the metrics of all systems and began to understand what the criteria when I'm jumping into any new system, creating the metrics that are of value to me is a very important step. And so that's wonderful design possibility, and the structured journaling that I talked about kind of plays into that. And it was a way in which I used PDAPO to make my OPs easier, because I knew exactly what I was going to write on at the end of the OP, so then I wanted to practice that at the beginning. Design methodologies was a relatively new awareness for me in the pre-capstone year, and now I feel like I've grown a lot as a designer and understand patterns of design. Zone Zero cultivation, this was a great awareness through the pre-capstone year. This culminated in the OP2 on health and happiness during my capstone year. The simple time and project management practices, many of which came into my awareness, getting things done was great for me in pre-capstone. And now in my capstone year, the active experimentation piece, which I think frees me from that fear of failure, because I think it's like wow, this is active experimentation encourages failure, encourages play, so that I'm actually doing stuff and I'm seeing the edges, the boundaries. Now, sooner or later, something I've incorporated into my to-do list all the time, action learning, was a new concept, and I feel like I've really embraced active experimentation and created those curriculums. So lastly, I want to revisit my thesis of relocalization, and I think many of us operate under this paradigm, thinking globally, using that abstract conceptualization part of our brain to, think about the greater globalized problems and then acting locally, being of impact where we are able. Some of the permaculture principles that I feel like really were highlighted during this year, this capstone phase of my journey, the obtaining a yield and producing no waste. I see that quite a bit in my chocolates and cordials and on the land, like that sense of gaining yields and not seeing things as a waste byproduct of the consumeristic society. Information as a resource, this plays into all the different ones of that education piece within whether I'm teaching or whether I'm teaching myself. Information is a resource. Working with nature, passion for me, and diversity, yielding stability, that sense of the interconnectedness of all things, and contrasting this relocalization with industrialization and globalization. These are two of the scary parts of our world today that have done so much. So on an ecological level, I think the industrialization and the globalization are bringing about climate change on a massive level, and the economic awareness connected to industrialization and globalization, the 1%. I feel like that awareness is rising in people, and I think that this is signifying a good pointer towards relocalizing. And the social aspect of feeling the burn, and I think regardless of what happens, I think there's been a revolution that is transforming the establishment, transforming the way in which the acceptance of the global elite has been changed. I think one of the things people like about industrialization and globalization is the efficiency of it. I think that, we need to be careful about seeing how diversity yields stability and whether we're creating resilient projects, resilient systems in our own lives, in our own communities, or whether we have a myopic lens just on efficiency. So again, like monoculture does produce more food than gardens, but it's also at the cost of needing greater and greater pesticides and greater fertilizers destroying the soil. So it's like seeing that efficiency. One of the jokes during my solar installation, I did a bunch of courses at Real Goods Solar Living Institute, where the permaculture convergence will be in California this September, and I did several weeks of courses up there to design my solar system. And the joke that my teacher would say is, well, solar panels, they don't like heat, so if you want them to be the most efficient, put them in your basement. But they're sure as hell not going to be effective down there because they're not going to get any light. So, creating efficient systems sometimes isn't the smartest way to approach systems. Wendell Berry's line on the monoculture, on the shifting of the way in which we create food. The farm-to-city migration has obviously produced advantages to the corporate economy. The absent farmers have had to be replaced by machinery, petroleum, chemicals, credit, and other expensive goods and services from agribusiness economy. So, which ought not to be confused with the economy of what used to be called farming. So I think he beautifully articulates that challenge of like, well, yeah, it's more efficient, but the money, it's creating unemployment among farmers and giving all the money to corporations who aren't even creating food on as good of a level anymore. We see that same thing with CAFO's concentrated animal feedlot operations versus pastured livestock, processed foods. We see that ability to make things more efficient and use really cheap sweeteners like high fructose corn syrup and soybean oil as the fat. Those are the two things that are the most commonly used in processed foods because they're the cheapest, the most efficient. But I invite people to cook their own dinner. Big pharma, clearly, that globalized, industrialized world versus kind of disempowering people from those mind, body, spirit disciplines, being in touch with the herbal world, with nature, having more natural solutions. Beekeeping is a passion for me, and definitely think that we're destroying our entire ecosystems through the challenges that we're giving the bees. The fact that 7 seed companies control 3/4 of the seed market, and that all those companies started as chemical companies like Syngenta, DuPont, Monsanto, is hugely scary. And I think that that's one where information need be a resource on how to seed save, how to start seeds. Industrialization, started, with the assembly line, and I think, again, on education, bringing people back to the do-it-yourself model, the homesteading, anti-consumeristic model. Amazon, again, a very efficient system, get things to your door in 2 days, but not as resilient for community as buying local. Insurance agencies, in some ways, this need for doctors to insure themselves against malpractice is such an element of the trust that we've lost as a community. And again, a Wendell Berry quote, he talks about the amount of money leaving the country to the pockets of insurance agencies. And he looks at that of like all of this money is lost to it by the failure of community. A good community, as we know, insures itself by trust, by good faith, goodwill, by mutual help. A good community, in other words, is a good local economy. It depends on itself for many of its essential needs and is thus shaped, so to speak, from the inside. Unlike most modern populations that depend on distant purchases for almost everything and are thus shaped from the outside by the purposes and the influence of the salesman. God, I just love him. So some of my projects, creating resiliency, creating community in my own life, definitely on a home scale, community-based, running workshops, inspiring some action learning, do it yourself, creating resilient health for myself through gardening, through my herbal products, the renewable energies, the food forests, natural building, sustainable beekeeping, seed saving. All of these things are, much more resilient approach to how we are relocalizing and creating community around ourselves. So I hope I'm inspiring some relocalization in ways in which you can relocalize your own lives. So thanks very much for joining the call today. It was a joy being with everyone and presenting. So look forward to any feedback and appreciate your support.
Thank you. Wonderful. All right, I want to just give everyone a moment, maybe like 30 seconds, to just integrate the presentation, and we're going to shift our minds now into asking questions. I would like to refrain from giving feedback yet. We'll have a 20-minute time frame to do that in a moment following the questions. So let's consider this question part still concluding the presentation. Raise your hand with the number 2 if you have a question. I'll give you just, again, about 20 more seconds to think. Okay, we have 3 or 4 questions, and I'll call your name out, and if you could be succinct, and Liam, I'll also ask that you'll respond with a succinct answer as well. Let's start with Ava.
Great, wonderful. So I've got a few questions. I might just dwindle it down to 2, though. I know that you mentioned that you've got a lot of articles that you've created and that you referenced, and I just wanted to see where we could access those materials.
Yeah, so if you go to my profile page and you go into OP2, there's links to everything from my OPs, and all of my OPs are linked from my profile page. So if we connect on that, then all the links for both my pre-capstone and capstone are there. Ideally, fairly soon, ideally within this year, a lot of them will be getting up on my website, as I kept saying.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm a little stalled right now in terms of creating the website.
Great. And I know that you also said that you were going to send something for the Gaia newsletter. Can you tell us about a bit about what to expect for that?
Yeah, I'm excited to share some of my articles with the Gaia newsletter. So that'll be very fun. And yeah, as you can see, I have quite a bit on both, Zone 0, like herbal medicine, and then some stuff on the chocolate. So those are. And then more and more stuff coming out on the land stewardship one, although that I mostly was doing slideshows, so as opposed to articles on propagation, because slideshows were an easier medium for me.
Okay. And I had just one other question. I wanted to find out what involvement you've had within the Gaia University community with Guild Buddies, and maybe just you could share a little bit about how being a main advisor has helped you with your own projects and documentation.
Yeah, so both of those are true. Definitely still connect with some of my Guild buddies, and find that, one of my best practices on that note is that I always do quite a bit of writing after my main advising meetings and after a Guild buddy session, and feel like my mind has helped, talking out loud has helped clarify so much for me around where my project is heading. And then as you pointed to as well, Ava, being a main advisor, being on the calls with, holding that space and supporting associates has been a wonderful way for me to recognize, patterns that a lot of different associates have and that are in my own life. And so it's I'm inspired to work when I connect with my associates as well as when I'm connecting with Guild buddies and my advisors.
Great, thank you.
Okay, very good. And let's go to Kate. Kate,
hi guys. Yep, I'm here.
There
So hi Liam, this is Kate. I am just wondering, you talked a little bit about other models that you were basing some of your work off of with the chocolatiering and making a curriculum, but do you have any mentors or historical people besides Wendell Berry who you've been drawing from for inspiration and or help?
Yeah, certainly. I have some primary mentors in my life. Like one of my good friends who I lead some workshops with. He's certainly a mentor for me, and he runs a goat dairy and lives up fully self-sustaining lifestyle up in the mountains of Big Sur, California. And, he inspires parts of my life, both in terms of how he shares that wisdom and in terms of, some of the businesses he's created, having an active goat dairy with selling cheese and, he sells honey and olives, and then also shares his information. So we gave a talk this past spring at Esalen on the arts of homesteading, and kind of looked at he has 40 acres in the mountains, and I have an acre down in Baja, and we have different approaches to homesteading. He being much more of an old school homesteader, and I'm a little more of a modern day homesteader. Other favorite writers, I will think on that. I mean, I certainly use a lot of books, like within the chocolatier curriculum. I did connect with a friend of mine who I knew from an herbal program that I'm part of, and he runs this great company out of Berkeley where he does bean to bar chocolate. So he takes it all the way from the bean to the finished product. And we connected at an herbal seminar. I'm also concurrently to Gaia doing the herbal certification through East West Herbology, which is Michael Tierra's school in Ben Lomond, California. And that's been fun. And he does herbal chocolates, and he does and so I worked with him a couple times as a mentor. So I know, choosing to work with individual people that I really liked and respected rather than enrolling in like a program, because I realized I could actually learn on my own with that support. So that's a lovely question. Like, how would I use and gain support from people who knew more than me, which is great. And I feel like,
Liam, I'm sorry. I'm going to need to ask you to wrap up your answer to this question, because there are more questions, and we're already done with our time limitation for questions. So
totally.
Maybe just one or two more sentences.
Yeah, so mentoring is good. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we are at the end of our allotted time for questions. We're actually a couple minutes over. So I want to honor the fact that Fernando had his hand up. So maybe if you could just give a really brief question, brief answer, that would be fantastic, so we can move to feedback. Fernando?
Yeah, I'm just wondering about your future, no? You talk a lot about being local, and from your presentation, I was able to gather that you possibly would like to move to Mexico to start some businesses there. So I'm just wondering if that's your move, or how are you going to manage to live in California and in Mexico, or what's in your horizon?
Like, yeah, what local means to me has got to be funny, because I belong to many different communities in California, and then I have this acre in Mexico. So that feels like a great place to be planting the roots. And I also, local to me is in some ways a mindset more than a space on the earth, because I am a nomad, but I feel like I'm connected to a lot of wonderful communities where I'm able to share how everything is connected. So yeah, wonderful question, and yeah, definitely putting some energy into creating life down in Mexico as well, for at least 6 months, 9 months a year.
Okay, great. All right, so thank you everyone for those questions, and for Liam for your wonderful answers. So we'll now say that the presentation part of this is concluded and move into feedback. The way I want to do this is I'm going to ask you to raise your hand if you'd like to give feedback. So go ahead now and put your hand up with the number 2 if you want to be included in the feedback round. So Ava and I will go for sure, and it would be great if some other people wanted to share. So again, raise your hand with the number 2. And Ava and I, being, engaged with the university for quite a length of time, I've been Liam's advisor since 2012 and have been an advisor since the university began. and also the Director of Advisory Services since 2010. So I'll be giving quite a bit of feedback, potentially even for like 5 minutes. Ava will give feedback, and then so far it looks like Sunita. And feel, as an associate and peer, feel free to do whatever feels authentic to you as far as feedback. You don't have to model your feedback after Ava and I. It's just an opportunity for Liam to get diverse reflection. Okay, so anyone else want to get on deck? I want to know now, kind of, so that I have a sense of how to gauge the time. So far it's just Anita. Anyone else? Raise your hand with the number 2 if you'd like to give feedback. So while I'm waiting to see if anyone else raises their hand, I'll just say really quickly, again, we're looking at presentation, content, and process. Presentation, content, and process, and trying to give diversity of different types of feedback. All right, Liam, we're going to do the entire feedback round, and then at the end, I'm going to ask you to do a little debrief and check out. So Ava, would you like to begin?
Sure. Thanks, Jennifer. Great job, Liam. It was really all very interesting. I felt engaged the whole time. I really, really enjoyed all of your enthusiasm in your voice and how you make others excited by the material that excites you. So really great job with that. I thought that possibly you could have slowed down a bit with your talking. I know that there was a lot of material to cover, but it felt a little bit fast, so just more of a pause maybe between slides and just a little bit slower would have been, it would have just made it easier to grasp every single thing that you said. I think I missed just a couple of things. So I thought you did a great job with the screen share. I had at least a strange thing happen twice at one point, but it worked out pretty well. I just had to refresh my page. So not a big deal, and I thought that was a good use of technology there. I really enjoyed the color scheme of your presentation. There was one slide that I felt like was a little bit confusing with a lot of words that felt distracting, and some of the text was a little too small and I couldn't read it very well, but overall I loved the photos that you used and really good use of visuals. In terms of content, I thought that it was, you had such a vast array of content. I think you did a really good job at organizing that. I really liked the slide that did the explanation of IESC and what applied permaculture design means. And I really loved how for each of your projects you shared the best practices. I thought that those were really a nice thing to include. I thought that there were a few terms maybe in your OP3 that might have been confusing to people, especially who might not have English as a first language, and it would have been good to get some more context around like what cordials are. I was married to a chef, so I know about this, and I think they're like alcohol-filled or liqueur-filled candies or chocolates. So that would have been good to have a little bit more context. And also context around maybe like what the LCR and lipid are for people who aren't a part of the Gaia community. And I loved hearing all of the different design methods you used. The design piece was really a big highlight for me, and I liked that you spent quite a bit of time discussing that. I thought that was really nice. That was a big highlight for me. In terms of process, I know just from being a part of the community that you've done a really good job managing your time and being a part of Gaia radio calls, and that you've been quite a star associate in a lot of ways just because of your ability to integrate into the Gaia community so well through Gaia radio and as a main advisor. And participation in orientation and meeting with guild buddies, yada, yada, yada. So I really, it would have been good to hear you brag a little bit about all of those things and how you managed your program so well and how you met with your main advisor on a regular basis and the other resources that you drew upon from Gaia University like guild buddies and the Gaia radio calls, et cetera. So overall, I thought it went really well. So proud of you. This all of the work you've done is so amazing and inspiring, and like I said, your enthusiasm really is apparent, and it gives me enthusiasm as well. So, well done. Round of applause.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Ava. And since I have quite a bit to share, how about, since Sunita is the only other person that has her hand up, let's go with Sunita first. Sunita?
Just to say, Liam, it was great. It was awesome. I was just sitting here all this while listening, and I didn't get distracted at all. And even when the bell was going, you were over time, I still felt like I wanted you to continue. Like, it was just so great. It was so engaging. It was, I felt like it was just so dramatic. Um, yeah, I mean, like, I just enjoyed the fact that you gave a brief um, overview of how everything was going to go, like on the very first page, and then you walked us through the presentation with the different titles that you're giving, like the applied permaculture, your OPs, your TCs, and the designs and all of these things, and like there was a pre understanding for me how everything was going to work, and I just expected that, and it moved that way. And a bit of maybe great feedback is that there were a few things I didn't understand. Maybe it was from my context, but that I didn't understand some of your terms like Ayurveda, chakra, DIY. I don't know what those mean. So at some slides I felt a bit confused, and I could not follow through. But I mean like overall, I feel really inspired. I just felt your voice and your passion and how you run all of these things, your life, your presentation, articles, your OPs, and then the main advising sessions. I mean, like everything all together. I think it was just amazing. Thank you. Check.
Fantastic. Okay, great. So quick process note before I share. Let's see. So generally these calls are about an hour and 45 minutes long, so we are almost at our hour and a half point marker in the call. It looks like I'll be the last person to share feedback, and we'll probably be done with the call at about 15 minutes past the hour. So really quick, just point of reference, raise your hand. So Herman, I see that you have your hand up that you might want to give feedback after I'm finished. If we have time, then we will. Now I want you to raise your hand with the number 3 if you can stay on the call till 15 minutes past the hour, just so I get a sense of who can stay on. Raise your hand with the number 4 if you need to get off, so I can make sure you do a quick check out. So 3 if you can stay on till 15 past the hour, 4 if you need to get off. Okay, great. The reason I wanted to do that really quick is just to make sure that everyone got a chance to at least say, 30 seconds of a checkout. Okay, I'm going to go next, and my feedback is going to be, a little long because this is the last presentation that Liam's going to give, and I have been his advisor for 4 years, so this is a moment to summarize not only this presentation but his work in general. Okay, so yes, wow, Liam, I am just so proud of you. And even when I introduced you, I said that you've kind of been a star student, and Ava shined that same light on you. And I will just once again begin this by saying that I've thoroughly enjoyed the way that you consciously engaged in your projects, your program, your pathway, and your output packaging process, and your role as an advisor for the university. It's been very thoughtful, passionate, engaged in a sense of, really wanting to add value to other people's lives, and it definitely shined through in this presentation as it has throughout the 4 years that I've known you. So very well done. Very proud to have had the opportunity to influence your life, and honored to have a chance to collaborate and in your growth and share in a way that also has impacted my own learnings and experience. So I'm going to divide my feedback up like Ava did and just share some things on presentation here first. So overall, I thought that you used screen share really well. You had a really good overall use of media and IT. I thought the formatting of some of your slides could have been a little bit improved, but overall very fantastic media, mixed media. I thought you did, as Sunita said, a really good overview at the very beginning. I loved especially the way you outlined your 5 OPs, both the delivery of how you presented them using the IT that you chose, the presentation style, and the language. I could tell that you were setting us up for a journey, and you definitely followed through. I like how you gave context for the different projects, and you shared the key outcomes of each of those output packets, and that's evident that you, again, followed through. I was missing a little bit of the thread of relocalization and permaculture principles throughout that delivery, but I loved how you wrapped it up the very end and conclusion, and therefore it met the need that I had. Again, I felt that you were exquisitely passionate, and especially when you were talking about chocolate. Your voice just was dynamically enthusiastic around your chocolate and cordials. That was really awesome to see your excitement. A couple of constructive points. Some of the slides had a lot of text, similar to what Ava said, and in particular, they just seemed distracting, or they didn't directly relate to what you were verbally sharing. And perhaps when that is a situation, don't spend so much time resting on those slides. It's better if you're talking using language other than what's on the slide, it's better to let us rest on an image so that we're not getting like fragmented information. On the first text slide, that was how I felt fragmented. The slide with the degree through OPs, when you were listing the key info on each OP, felt similarly overwhelming. Perhaps change the font more, or put the key outcomes of each OP within a new colored box. Some way to, so I'm talking about the slide that you had the thesis and the principles listed, where you had like, this is my theme at permaculture design, and then you had your thesis of relocalization and whatnot. You were like listing the OPs in the left-hand column, and in the right-hand column you had all of the many like outcomes, and it was just extremely overwhelming. So maybe if you put those outcomes that kept popping up in like a blue box or something, just distinguish them from static content to changing content, that would help my eyes integrate the information. Okay, let's see. Some of the key outcome slides, the font was far too small for me to read, so that's something to consider. In general, I was thinking maybe that information could have been better displayed in pictures rather than text. Okay, in the first, when you were talking about OP2, so up until OP2, you were at a very slow pace, and then for whatever reason, when you got into that list mode, you started talking fast, and you never stopped talking fast until the very, very end. So I don't know if that's just a psychological thing. When you had a big list, you felt like you needed to rush through it, but just know that that continued then to be your pace throughout the whole call. So the combination of you had a lot of information with, I think, that your mind reacted to a list. And again, that's why I kind of feel like it would have been better to shorten the information that you were sharing in that list and maybe have pictures. Okay, I'm just also noting some things Ava said about acronyms that you didn't spell out. Okay, I'm moving forward. Okay, content-wise, I would like to say that nice use of permaculture flower and how it incorporated into your OPs. You did well at overviewing and defining applied permaculture design in the very beginning and the end. When you were sharing about the 8 patterns of health, I felt like you were really teaching us So awesome job. Great use of the purpose and relevance related to that, and I similarly appreciated the snapshot on how to temper chocolate, and you continually throughout the reflection of your output packets and then the reflection of your overall engagement of output packet documentation and pattern look at pathway learning were teaching us, and I think you did a fabulous job, and a lot of times associates miss that, so well done. Very strategic outcomes. I think you had a good overall strategic engagement in the field of applied permaculture design, and even though we haven't yet approved that topic as your pathway, I feel confident that from my perspective, you have succeeded at defining and engaging and intervening in that pathway. I really appreciated the moments where you were talking about social, ecological, and economic matrix busting. This is something that we discussed a lot while I was your advisor, and that I wanted you to pay more attention to. So I'm glad that you included it in your presentation and valued when you made it explicit, especially at the very end. I'm glad that you focused on pattern engagement. I wanted more, though, of this type of language in this presentation, especially because it has been somewhat missing in some of your output packets. In that same sense, I think you could have taken a little bit more time to define your thesis in the beginning, and then, like I said, integrate each output packet and how it met the needs of your thesis throughout. I had a bunch of questions. I'm not going to go ahead and say them for the sake of time, but I'm typing this, so I'll send you the question. I had about 5 questions related to content that I didn't get to ask. So let me just end on process. The areas that I think that you could have improved on process-wise is more emphasis on critical evaluation of the field and of each project. I didn't hear until the very end you share very many resources beyond your own experience. It came up in some of the questions. I did notice that you did not share much about allies, collaborators, and so on, so I was glad that Kate asked you that question. When you shared about Gaseti, I was very happy to see you defining your design process so clearly, but be careful when you're using acronyms that you're using them correctly, because what you actually were using was Gaseti instead of Gaseti. So that was a little confusing, and perhaps especially for someone who is just getting into design. And then, as Ava said, I wanted to hear much more about your overall pathway. How did you manage your projects, your OP creation, your engagement in Gaia, and your pathway requirements? You succeeded over these 4 years at setting up very realistic timelines for yourselves, and were, I would say, one of my most communicative associates around renegotiating. So when you realized that you needed to adjust your timeline, you were very, very articulate and very accountable to reaching out to me as your advisor to make sure that we were both on the same page. And that's not something I see in many associates. So as Ava said, I would have liked for you to identify some of your tools and techniques of how you managed your pathway so successfully. And then lastly, I think I would have really, I wanted to say one thing. So to incorporate that pathway reflection into this presentation when you already had so much content, I think you could have gone a little bit less heavy on all the different outcomes that were from each project. You spent a lot of time talking about key outcomes, and I think you could have maybe reduced that by half and spent more time talking about your overall pathway. Last process constructive feedback is I would have enjoyed seeing your profile on Mahara. If you could have taken some screenshots or even taken us there briefly just so that we can interacts with what you actually created would have been super helpful. My final positive reflection on your process, I really valued personally how much you reflected on getting my feedback as your main advisor and getting the feedback of your peers. And I know you were very involved with different guild mates. I think Kate was one of them, so that's fantastic. I appreciated that you added your growing edges and next steps, both per project and then overall. I thought your use and understanding of the PDAPO criteria, which is how we grade our SkillFlex development in the university, was very proficient, and obvious that you have a keen insight into the workings of the Gaia University pedagogy. So awesome, fantastic. I appreciated how you even emphasized the importance of that for other associates. So again, a teaching moment. And then overall, I thought that your emphasis on GIS-80 and the cold model and how you did a brief comparative assessment in that graphical image where you had the different rows and columns was one of my favorite parts about your presentation in thinking about you succeeding at doing some critical evaluation. And then I'll just end again on your passion and your pattern level approach going all the way down into the power of manifestation. So passion, you've got it in ACEs. Your pattern level approach to me means that you're capable of really seeing the big picture and integrating and looking for commonalities in your own work and how that applies to other people's work. And that's why I think you're such a good advisor. And then power of manifestation is you're able to take all that complex information and really hone it down into details and accountability and action and really good time management, planning, and implementation, plus doing it in a way where you're constantly like tapping back out and evaluating the process and integrating all of that and moving it forward and also believing in yourself. So well done. I'm going to stop there just with much appreciation. And so we have about 5 minutes left. Liam, I would like you to go first and just share. We'll do a sort of official wrap up here. If you want to share for about a minute and just thank everyone for coming or whatever is on your mind. Very briefly, share any quick reflections on the feedback. Then we'll give each person about 30 seconds to check out. And then I'm going to ask that you stay on the call, and we're going to have a bigger debrief. And anyone who wants to stay on to hear the debrief can. So, Liam, just maybe 1 minute of final thoughts.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. Well, I really enjoyed, appreciated hearing everyone's thoughts and reflections. And, yeah, thanks for coming. And, yeah, I mean, the biggest piece I took is like that I did miss an opportunity to share a bit more of my process, which my experience with Gaia U has been fantastic, and tons of gratitude to you, Jennifer, and to Guild Buddies. And like it's been the process has helped me hold these projects in my life and inspire new things and inspire new techniques for how I engage with the work that I'm doing. And I do, I think I made little gestures of like ways in which I incorporate Jennifer's feedback, which has been very valuable kind of throughout my entire pathway. And I didn't spend much time, if any, kind of remarking on that process element. And I think, as everyone could see, I had a lot of content that I was excited to share. And again, your feedback was valuable, Jennifer. I could have left some of the content outcomes from each myopia and shared a bit more about my process through Gaia U and some of my time management stuff, which has been huge growth for me kind of throughout the program, was like kind of using that framework, that structure of Gaia U to get more and better projects done and access my stuff in good ways. So big thank you to the Gaia U community and to this pathway. Thanks, everybody.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Liam. And again, we'll stay on the call for a little while after everyone else gets off. Okay, so let's do a round of checkout now, and we've got about 3 minutes left. So that's about 30 seconds per person. If you just want to share your overall appreciation for being a part of the call, let's start with Kate.
Hi there. I'm really thankful that I got to hear more about your work, Liam, after we kind of lost contact. And I'm also really appreciative for your unique and special talents and contributions. It's given me a great model for my end-of-year presentation. And best of luck to you in absolutely everything that you do. Thanks so much.
Great. Thanks for coming on the call, Kate. And let's hear from Beatrice next.
Hi there. Yeah, it was a great call for me. Very interesting. I was glad also to hear people from all over the world. It's very nice to feel this community feeling. So thank you all for being there.
Great, glad to have you as part of the call today. Okay, and Sunita, I'm going to let you go next. Even though you've already shared, I want to honor that you said you need to get off. So your final thoughts?
Yeah, thank you so much, Liam, and I'm very happy that I got to know you. And though we haven't communicated, but I said I would jump on this call to get to know you better, and I just did. And yeah, I just got a heads up for my end of phase presentation as well. It was just great meeting everybody, and I'm happy to be on the call. Great.
Good. Very, very great that you would come to support Liam, get to know him, and also as a sort of modeling for your own work, Sunita. Okay, and then Herman, and I know that you had wanted to give some feedback, so I can give you about a minute.
Yeah, I'm particularly very glad to have been part of this call today because I'm relatively new to Gaia U, so it's really a great eye opener to what has to come for me. And I absolutely loved Liam's presentation. I mean, what I could get off the aura he was emanating is this aura of passion and someone who's very happy where he is at the moment, and that's the feeling I got. And looking at all that he has done, all the experiences and things that he has been able to accomplish, I didn't really get the sense of difficulty or attack. Seems things actually moving smoothly for him, which I believe to be true because 20 years of experience isn't just anything. It's a lot. So I'm glad he was able to share all of that, and I am a very passionate person myself, so I could really identify in most of the things that he was saying and explaining. So once again, Liam, thank you very much, and good luck. Yeah, check.
Well, this has just been heartwarming to hear all these great reflections for Liam. Awesome. Okay, Fernando?
Yeah, thank you, Liam. I'm very appreciative to be able to attend this call. It's just really refreshing to listen to the work that you have done to take care of yourself, take care of community, to be a mentor and a teacher. I really appreciated all the disclosures that you had for us other Gaia U students that are still in this process, and I know for me it was very helpful to see all your pathway as I'm stepping into my capstone project right now, and I think it was just a really good explanation and demonstration on what are the possibilities. So thank you so much.
Okay, and then Ava, if you would go.
Yeah, thank you so much, Liam. I want to share that I'm leaving this call inspired and with a wonderful sense of gratitude to you for joining our community and adding so much to it. It's just so obvious that this Gaia University model has really helped you thrive, and it really is just so heartwarming and, like I said, inspiring whenever I see people who just thrive within this platform. So thank you so much for everything that you've shared with our community and continue to share as a main advisor. And wonderfully done. Yeah, thanks, Liam.
Okay, great. All right, so we'll officially end the call. I want to thank you all for being part of it. And Ava, I want to especially thank you for helping set up the IT and sitting in as a mentor yourself. If everyone wants to go ahead and turn your mics on, you can say farewell, and we'll stay on the call for a little while longer if you want to stick around, but we'll officially end the call now. So thank you for coming.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank
Yeah, thank you, Liam.
Thanks, everybody.
That was great, and wish you luck.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Great. So for anyone who wants to stay on, we are going to do a quick debrief of about 10 minutes maximum, where I'm going to ask Liam a couple of questions. And Ava, if you want to stay on, you can. You don't have to if you don't want to. I'm going to go ahead and put us in a private room